Job says something to the effect of, I've heard of you by
Yeah.
the hearing of the ear, but now my eyes see you. And I
Yeah.
remember after a year in just deep journaling and talking with God and prayer and I remember some nights I would get up and I would just go to the closet and lie on the floor and just cry out to him and talk to him. And the perspective of him changed, where it went from either a silent God or a God looking at me in judgment to a God with wide open arms.
Hello and welcome to the Kill the Dragon podcast. I'm your host, Gunnar Akridge, and author of the book by the same title, Kill the Dragon, Reclaiming Your Life from the Dark Side of Religion. And that's what this podcast is all about. We're exploring the themes related to the influence of the religious spirit in our lives. So if you've been hurt by religion, or if you're simply like me and you envision a church that looks more like Jesus than a dragon, then this podcast is for you. If you're watching on YouTube, hit that subscribe button or give us a follow on your favorite podcast platform so you don't miss an episode of Kill the Dragon. Well, I'm excited to have our guest, Hope Myers, on the podcast today. She is, I'm going to let her tell her story today, but she's the editor of Kill the Dragon, the book that I released last year. And so shout out to Hope for making the book readable. Hope, welcome to Kill the Dragon.
Thank you. I'm so glad to be here. I was thinking through the process of editing it, and it was such a solidifying thing for me, with a lot of just things I come to in my faith, and even just you bringing it into words,
Yeah.
where some things that some spaces I've come from and where I've gone to. And it's just such a powerful book. And I'm just so grateful that I was part of the process and happy to edit away. And it was just such an amazing process, for sure.
Yeah, well, you made the book what it is, so I appreciate you. Well, why don't you
Oh.
tell our listeners, our viewers, a little bit about yourself?
Yeah. So I currently live up in Stafford, Virginia, Northern Virginia, right outside of DC. Come from Savannah, was our last duty station. I'm a military spouse. My husband has been in the military for, I think it's been something like 15, 16 years now. And we've been married for 13 years this year.
Right.
Yeah, I am a writer and editor by trade. So I love getting my elbows deep in anything, the written word. And yeah, just I guess it's funny, I write by both, it's my day job and my hobby as well. So
Yeah.
I always have a good time balancing the two, which is so fun. So but yeah, definitely my passion around that. And yeah, just always a good time.
Awesome. Well, I wanted to have you on the podcast, especially for the content around. I think it's I've lost it now. Chapter 7, maybe. I don't know. Yeah, no, chapter 6, doctrine over
Yes.
devotion, and I know that was one of the chapters that really stuck out to you as you were editing it, and I just thought it'd be great to have you tell a little bit of your story out of kind of the whole religious mindset, like we're all walking out of. But before we jump into that, I do want to read a quote from chapter 6. It says, "Sound doctrine is good, but what good is sound doctrine if in pursuit of it we have forsaken the first and greatest commandment,
Mm,
to love
hmm.
God with everything? What
Yeah.
if it's possible to believe all the right things but not have a heart that is truly changed by what we believe?
Hmm.
What if it's possible to know about Jesus but not truly know him? What if correct doctrine, as great as it is not good enough? There is
Hmm.
a real danger in being so orthodox that we find ourselves fighting for a God we don't know, rather than loving a God who never asked us to fight for him in the first place.
Hmm.
When doctrine takes the place of devotion, there's a dragon afoot." And I Hope, I've heard some of your story. It's similar to many people who've reached out after reading the book, honestly. And one of the main reasons I wanted to start this podcast is because there's so many people who've
Yeah.
come from a very religious upbringing, and there's been this mind renewal that is either the book has either helped them start that journey, or it was like a kind of a major thing in their lives on this journey of kind of renewing their mind to who Jesus is and what God is really like. So I know that's going to be relatable to a lot of our followers, our
Mm,
listeners. So I in our conversations, you said something that really stuck out to me. You said my journey was not as much about deconstructing as it was relearning. So
yeah.
could you maybe dive into that a little bit?
Yeah, I think for me, when I think of the term like deconstructing, I see where a lot of people, and this is, I think due to a lot of like church trauma that can occur, kind of run to like one side and they throw everything out.
That's true.
And
Yeah.
in the process of relearning, for me, like what I believed down to the very core of like, do I believe that God is real and exists and is present? Um, for me, it was kind of a reshaping and a relearning of a lot of principles that I think weren't necessarily wrong per se in theology or in doctrine, but were um just very book based, very theology based, and nothing was relational. There was no transaction that occurred between you and a loving father. It was a very removed,
Yeah.
God is a very removed being. And so, where I've tried to kind of take that and relearn that is, and it's a long process, right? Where you kind
Sure.
of
Yeah.
revisit a lot of the things that maybe you were taught, and maybe theologically they're fine. It's just how how I relate them to me. They have no relational aspect. They have
Yeah.
nothing where we cultivate a real relationship with a father who loves us and who
Yeah.
cares about us.
Yeah. So in growing up, maybe your background, how did some of your background and religious upbringing kind of influence how you saw God at that time?
Yeah, so I grew up in a well, during my formative years, so teenage years and on, I grew up in a very conservative Christian circle, to the point of being just really repressive. There was a lot of shaming that occurred in that denomination and within the church culture and amongst other just other membership and people in the membership there. And so what happened was I began to see God first of all as like a very angry God,
Yeah.
somebody who was always I was always doing something wrong, and um just repeated fear of hell and condemnation,
Hmm.
and nothing based from a space of love. And so I remember it like very lots of yelling, lots of,
Hmm.
if you don't do this, you'll go to hell. If you do
Yeah.
this, you're constantly in sin. You're constantly in a space of, God is always angry at you. You can never do anything right. And so I think just growing up with that, I just got into this place of paralyzing fear and anxiety that if I didn't do the right thing, I, God would just be angry at me all the time. And I felt
Yeah.
that he was angry at me all the time. I never felt the love of God, and I never felt his presence. Um,
Mm.
during those years. And it was all very religion based, very doctrine based, very much like if I follow all the rules and I do all the right things, then God will bless me, and that became such a
Yeah.
like transactional to like relationship where when there wasn't blessing, I became angry and didn't understand like
Right.
I'm doing all the right things, God. How can you
Hmm.
let these things happen to me?
Right. I think that's so common in if
Oh yeah.
most church environments. I love how the word used transactional, because it really does feel that way. And it's like you're never good enough, like
Yeah.
and there's some truth into what, like you said, you can't just throw all of it out, because the Bible talks about sin and judgment and all of this stuff, like, but it also presents the remedy. And I think in
Yeah.
many church circles or many religious environments, the remedy is not the main focus. The main focus is the the judgment of God, the righteousness of
Yeah.
God, which is very important. You can't leave that part out. But the
Mm.
love of God is what sent Jesus to pay the penalty, for our sin, and take care of that for us. So yeah, I wonder what, at what point in your life did things begin to shift as far as how you saw God? What were some of the factors that led to that? Because I know that you're in it enough. It anything that's It's almost like anything that's closer to what his true character and his nature is, it's almost off-putting. It's like, oh wait, is this correct?
Yeah.
Is this biblical? So what was that journey like?
Yeah. So I think it started in like 2018. Um, I began to feel a call. We just started going to the dwelling at that time, and I began to feel the call of just the love of God. And um and then what really changed for me was tragedy honestly hit my life in 2019. I faced divorce. My husband and I were on the brink of divorce, and we um honestly, I think it was like rock bottom for us.
Yeah.
And I was in such a like the lowest place I think I'd ever been in my life. And I remember a verse of God being near to the brokenhearted and being in a space of feeling really heartbroken, but also very confused
Yeah.
about why God would let um tragedy, why God would let divorce be something that I was dealing with,
Mm.
and coming to a space of acceptance of just him being so present in that place and him
Yeah.
being becoming my Abba father,
Right.
and him being such a comfort, but also a refuge and someone to believe in and put hope in and put trust in, that everything that was happening was for a purpose and that he could rebuild and mend like broken places in my life
Yeah.
and in my marriage. And so that was really the turning point, I think, was that year in 2019, and then rebuilding from there and becoming so close to him. There's a verse in Job that I think about where Job says something to the effect of, I've heard of you by
Yeah.
the hearing of the ear, but now my eyes see you. And I
Yeah.
remember after a year in just deep journaling and talking with God and prayer, and I remember some nights I would get up and I would just go to the closet and like lie on the floor and just cry out to him and talk to him. And the perspective of him changed, where it went from either a silent God or a God looking at me in judgment to a God with like wide open arms
Yeah.
and a God of deep love. And I read so much of Isaiah during that time where he talks about, I will never break a bruised reed, somebody in a bruised place, somebody in a
Mm.
heartbroken or difficult place. I will never break that person. And I just really started to cling to those verses. And again, it's that whole reshaping and relearning where these verses I had grown up with, but I had never seen them
Yeah.
as something that actually was applied to my life.
Wow.
And in this time, those verses became the life vest. Like they became something that I could cling on to and hold on to. And God became so real. And I started to really believe that he was someone who heard me and who cared
Yeah.
about me. and started to have visions and dreams of him, holding out his arms to me and being there and being present. And that was just, it's crazy because we look at life and we hope that we never face tragedy or things that will hurt us, and yet that God uses those things to bring us to him is just, I feel, is like a fact. It's not
Yeah.
something that we just can say, oh, well, God's
Yeah.
not going to use that, but he will and he can. And I think that that's, and that's part of the journey that he has. And so, yeah, he
Yeah.
became so real to me, and he was so present and so loving and continues to be.
That's beautiful. One of the things that I was thinking about when you're telling your story is, um, as much as religion wants to make it about performance, getting us to God, you didn't perform your way to his heart. It's like this was the lowest,
Yeah.
the lowest place you'd ever been, and he came to you
Yeah.
and began to reveal himself to you. Maybe talk about some of the, because I know in my personal journey out of the dark side of religion, and let me just say, I feel like we're all still on that journey sometimes,
Yes.
because
Oh,
it
absolutely.
takes like a lifetime to get just the shame out of your life and the
Yeah.
religious thing that we just pick up along the way. I think part of it is even just being humans, honestly,
Yeah.
and the shame that we live with and the separation from God and all that stuff. And it just takes a lifetime of just rewiring. And so one of these days one of these
We'll
days we're
make
gonna
it
look
there.
like we'll look like Jesus, it'll be great. But in my own personal journey, there were these moments where there was such a roadblock of like, I don't really know how to describe it other than it felt wrong to relate to God this way. Did you ever have those types of moments?
Hmm.
You can
That's an
identify with that?
Yeah, that's a really interesting point. I think where I kind of faced some confusion was growing up. I It's like I saw the two sides of God, and I had like two sides of God in my mind. I had like the God that's like this God of judgment, and then I have suddenly this God of love. And
Mm,
so I really struggled for a little while being like, which God do I believe in,
yeah,
and realizing that there is a part of God that, is very just and very true. And, he has parts of
yeah,
him that either I don't understand as well,
right,
or or maybe just some things that I will still work on understanding. But the side of him being such a loving father, I think it's weird because I don't know if it was trauma, but the switch flipped for me where I suddenly, it was like every word that he spoke to me was so much more kind and
yeah,
loving than anything I'd ever experienced up till that point. And
yeah,
so it was it was a very disorienting feeling sometimes where I was like, is this real? Is this just a, like, am I just
yeah,
imagining this? Or
yeah,
is this actually, this transition, is this actually happening? This suddenly, like the relationship, because again, like you said, transactionally, I don't have anything to give in this moment. I
yeah,
am in a
right,
really broken place. I can't, I wasn't in a good place to serve,
yeah,
and we look at all these things that we kind of like tick off as being like, this is, I'm being a good Christian by doing these things, and I couldn't do any of those things. And yet it was like in that place that he's like seeking me out and sitting with me
yeah,
and speaking with me, that is just so powerful. And so I'm like, I'm here, I have nothing to give, my hands are empty. And he's like, I want you in your empty hands. That's
yeah,
how I want you, is in that
right.
place.
That's beautiful. I think about, the most religious, I guess, the poster child for religion or church or being a follower of Jesus, whatever, is just knowing the Bible so well and praying hours a day and just
Yeah.
all of these things like you're supposed to be doing, all the ought tos, um, which are really good. They're disciplines, I'm curious as to how the disciplines have changed
Mm,
as you've seen God with a new filter. Because sometimes we're like doing those things in order to get His approval, or to even in order to maybe so He won't be mad at us. How has the spiritual disciplines changed in your life since seeing God differently?
they're motivated from a place of love, first of all, and
Yeah,
a desire to have relationship rather than a place of fear or I guess like fleeing or getting away from being
yeah,
condemned or shame. So, when we can remove the shame, the feeling of like, I remember growing up, if I didn't read my Bible for 30 minutes a day, I would feel
yeah,
shame because
yeah,
I was like, I'm a terrible Christian. I haven't read my Bible. And now, if I miss my Bible, it's more like, if I miss spending time in the Word, it's more like, man, I miss this part of relationship. I miss this relationship. I miss this friendship. I miss this connection that I have with my
yeah,
Father, that when I put the time into it, it just gets deeper and deeper. It's the well that never runs dry. So it's kind of this
right,
thing where it's like it just never runs out. So I definitely feel like that, even like my approach to it has changed, and because it's now based off of wanting relationship and a love-based relationship that I have with him, a love that I have and a desire that I have to be with him and be in his presence, and this hunger to learn more from him, but also, to sit at his feet and just tell him how much I love and care about him and how thankful I am for him,
yeah,
that it just, the whole perspective shifts, right? Like you walk away from it being rules oriented or like this specific time. And also, it opens up doors and other avenues of different ways to explore and sit with him to meditate. Like, I never meditated growing up,
mm,
I didn't know what that was. I
yeah,
didn't believe that God spoke to you in visions and dreams. So, even in like visions and dreams, like embracing that is just, I've been a huge, just opening the door wide to like the Holy Spirit and his presence in my life. And
yeah,
then, just even how I spend time in the Word, maybe it's just one verse and we just sit and we read it. We don't have to read 4 chapters in a day.
yeah,
That's not what he's asking of me. He's asking just, I think, more a simple, pure place that is like this desire for relationship and just a
yeah,
simple, quiet place where we spend time together. It doesn't have to be complicated, and it doesn't have to be a long list of things to be something that's really powerful.
right. That's so good. I'm learning right now in my life. I mean, I'm a pastor. I kind of have to be in the Word,
Yeah.
or I don't have anything to give on Sunday. Sunday's coming. That's always the thing for us. But I have to be really intentional that I don't get in a rut of just getting in the Word to get a word,
Yeah.
to just study, because that in itself, that can be pretty religious, of just like, I can know the Word backwards and forwards, inside out, and then my heart drift.
Mhm.
Like, the knowledge is actually growing and the heart is drifting.
Oh, yeah.
And it's kind of I almost sense this holy fear about that, honestly, because it's like, the more religious you are, the
Yeah.
more sometimes the more steeped in doctrine and the rituals and the practice and all that you are, sometimes that almost insulates your heart
Yeah.
to knowing him on a deeper level. And so there is a real danger there, not that we're living in fear about this, but it's like, if we where's our heart? Where's our
Mhm.
heart? He's in the book, I say something like, he's asking us to lay down our backpacks with all our books and all of our own knowledge and all this stuff, and just follow him. You
Mhm.
know,
Yeah.
doctrine's not bad. Doctrine is good. Theology is good. We need to know the word. But Jesus told the Pharisees at one point, he said, you know the word, but you reject the one that the word has revealed to you, basically, and
Mhm.
you know the word, but you don't know me. You won't come to me that you might have life,
Yeah.
and so I just um, I look at my life personally where I've come from, and I think I've got a long way to go, but I've seen just the grace of the Lord
Hmm.
just so evident, and so I wonder if there was one, maybe in a sentence, your journey was like, this was who God was before, and this is who He is now. What would you say?
Hmm. Oh, it's crazy because it's hard to like sum him up in, I think, like a phrase, but
Right.
who he was before was removed,
Mm,
distant, and who he is now is close. Who he is now is Abba. And
wow.
Abba in the truest sense of father, dad, like come sit on my, like sit beside me,
Yeah.
sit with me,
Yeah.
um, and spend time with me because I want to spend time
Yeah.
with you.
Yeah. It's the childlike the childlike way we approach Him, I
Yeah,
think, is was what was so new to me of Him just being that Father,
yeah,
and not that He wants something of me. He actually just wants me. He loves me.
yeah,
And to me, as a religious person, that sounded like pride.
yeah,
you know, that was like, it sounded like self-centeredness of like that God actually likes me. I've heard people say God doesn't just like me. Loves me. He likes me. And I'm like, I don't know. I
how can
honestly,
you like me?
that's how, that's how, that's how twisted I had
Mhm.
gotten in my mind. And I could hear people talk about God told me this, God speaks and all this. And I'm like, well, I just thought in the center of my being, I literally believe He wouldn't speak to me.
Oh
Why
yeah.
would He?
Oh yeah. Well, I think too, like I looked at it, and when you ask yourself like why would he? I know for me it was like, well, I'm such a hot mess. Why would he?
Yeah.
Like I've not worked on myself enough. I've
Yeah.
not done all these things as I. And then
Hmm.
it really needs to be, him, you, like what like he has said, I want to be with you. I want to spend time with you. Like I think that one of the biggest things that changed for me was actually believing the Bible when it says, all the I phrases of, I'm there for you. I love you. I care about you. I want to spend time with you. And the shifting of perspective in that, because it left me like questioning for a long time. Like, do you really want that though, God? Like,
Yeah.
you're such a, I can't even fathom who you are, and yet you wanna spend time with me? Like, that just
Yeah.
seems odd, like, you're in your nature of who you are as being creator and this grand God that I grew up believing was so big, and yet I was, nothing, but I am
Yeah.
something, and
Yeah.
I matter so much to him, and the fact that, he would see me as, like, what is the verse about the sparrows? But, if he cares for one of
Yeah.
these,
Yeah.
and you see the birds all day long flying around your house, or when you're out in the countryside, you just see flocks of them, and you're like, he cares for one of those, and how much more does he care for me?
Right.
And so the shift in perspective, I think, is just massive, but absolutely coming from that. And, sometimes I think we almost fight against that too, where some days it's so easy to like fall back in that attitude where you're just like, well, does he though?
Yeah.
Does he actually care? Because I
Right.
think the cynic in me will always be there, and I will always
Hmm.
have to challenge that side as I continue to relearn how I see God, because
Yeah.
it will be there, you know? And
Yeah.
if I'm being totally honest, it just, some days it crops up its ugly head.
Sure. Sure. Some days He's Abba, and I'm His son, and some days it's like, do I even know? Do I even know
Exactly.
you? Like,
Exactly. Yeah,
there's
it's so true.
I've been thinking about this verse. I had to look it up. Psalm 68, verse 5 and 6.
Mm-hmm.
It kind of gives this picture of God being that both and. It says this: a father to the fatherless, a defender of widows, is God in his holy dwelling.
Hmm.
So it's like I think I grew up, or religion gave me, or church culture, or whatever, gave me God is in his holy dwelling. Like,
Yeah.
so separate, so far away, so different, so unapproachable. But then the same verse says he's a father to the fatherless and a defender of widows. And it
Yeah.
goes on to say in verse 6, God puts the lonely in families.
Hmm.
And I just love that. It's just he is both. Like, he is, another scripture says he dwells in unapproachable light. Like, that was,
Hmm.
it's like, how can you even approach God that way? But through what Jesus has done, it's like he came so that we could approach him.
Yeah.
And no one comes to the Father but through me. That's the gospel. The way, the truth, and the life is what Jesus came to be for us. So
Hmm.
I would just I kind of want to wrap up our episode today. And I know that there are probably people listening that hope, as you've told your story, they've probably been like, well, that was me. I grew
Mm.
up exactly that way. I had that view of God. And so what would you say to someone watching who may be wrestling with that idea of God in the past, and just what would you say to them?
I would say, and this might sound kind of odd, but lean into a quiet place, where you can just sit with him and start receiving what he is going to
Mhm.
say to you.
Yeah.
Because I started finding that religion taught me a lot about how to either just hear but not actually retain anything,
Yeah.
or where I just was so busy in the transactional side of things where I was putting all of these things into the relationship. Like, okay, God, I am, reading my Bible, or I'm praying, and I would pray, for like 30 minutes, and it would be the long list of things like, okay, God, I need you to do this for me, and I need you to do that for me, and I need you to, fix this area of my life. I need you to heal this person. I need you to heal this about me.
Yeah.
And I never actually took time to sit and be quiet
Yeah.
and receive what he was speaking to me. And that was a practice. And that took a long time to get there, where I could just sit and be like, okay, God, I don't have anything. I
Mm.
remember there were places I had to go through where I was like, my hands are empty.
Yeah.
I want you to fill them up,
Right.
and get to that place where you can just kind of lean into a quiet place with him,
Yeah.
um, and hear from him.
Yeah. I love that. I remember one of the first conversations I had with a mentor of mine. We were with a group of other pastors and leaders, and this lady said, "Here's what I want you to do. Here's your assignment. I want you to take a piece of paper and a pen, and I want you to sit down with the Lord,
Mm-hmm.
and I want you to ask him a question. God, what do you think about me? How do
Hmm.
you feel about me?" And I remember the religion the religion in me went, "No, like,
No.
that's not what you ask God. You ask God what you should do for him. And I just remember that being one of the most powerful moments of my life, honestly.
Mm.
Just just him meeting me and speaking over me. Scripture says he sings over us.
Hmm. Yeah.
Like, the God I knew would never sing over me,
Yeah.
but the real Abba does.
Yeah.
It's beautiful.
The one who I titled, when I was kind of jotting things down, I titled my journey as Finding Abba, because I feel
Mm,
like I am still in the process of
yeah,
finding who he is. I haven't found Abba fully.
yeah.
Um, but I'm finding him. And I think that that's really a true summary of what I feel along the whole
Ye
journey of walking away from religion.
So I think you read Abba's Child by Brennan Manning, right? Somewhere in
Yes.
this journey.
Yes.
I'm going to put that in the description and the show notes and everything so that people can find that book. That was a pretty big deal for you
Yeah.
in your journey, and it was for me too.
It
Of
was.
just seeing God as a father. Abba's Child by Brennan Manning. I love a quote by Brennan. He says, "God doesn't love us as we should be because we'll never be as we should be. He loves us as we are," and
Yeah.
it's just beautiful. He loves the broken one. That's the one he died for.
Yeah.
So, all right. Well, we are running out of time. I got one more question though. How are you staying encouraged, Hope?
Oh man. I was trying to think through some things that I could recommend. I know we just dropped Abba's Child. I've been in
Yeah.
the process of rereading that right now. But
You
one
just
of the
read that one
things
over and over and
I know,
over.
right? It's over and over and over. One of the things that I have been focusing on just in this season is finding ways to get back to a simple place with God and back to
Yeah.
the basics of relationship with Him. And finding ways to just kind of make better space for that with just a busy life and a
Yeah.
lifestyle. And so yeah, one of the ways I'm finding kind of encouragement in my faith resource I can put out there. I've been listening to the Dwell podcast, or not podcast, the Dwell Bible app.
Yeah.
And I've been kind of, when I have a little bit of extra time, I will sit and listen to scripture and just find him in just unstructured moments throughout the day,
Yeah.
and that has really been lifting my spirits recently. I just find that's really been getting me in a closer place to him, which I really love.
Yeah. Sometimes it's just the simple things,
Yep.
just the little adjustments and taking a time out. Hey, oh,
Yeah.
you're here. You're here.
Yeah. Take a breath.
Well, yeah. Well, thank you so much, Hope. This has been a really good conversation, and I know that a lot of people are going to benefit from this. And I just appreciate you being on today.
Yeah, it was so powerful and such an amazing reminder of just how far he's brought me, and I'm
Yeah.
just so appreciative that I can be here and share that and hopefully touch some lives and sharing my story.
Yeah. Well, I love your story, and the Lord does too. So,
That's so true.
well, thank you guys so much for tuning in today. I hope this has helped you move forward in your own journey of slaying the dragon in your own life and seeing God as your Abba, as your Father. So, if it has been encouragement to you, would you consider leaving us a review so that other people can find the podcast as well? And if you're interested in a deeper dive into the content that we've talked about today, I'd encourage you to read the book Kill the Dragon, available on Amazon, wherever books are sold. For questions or other resources, you can contact us at killthedragonbook.com. And a very special thanks again to our guest, Hope Myers. And a big shout out to Joel Auger, who wrote and recorded the song you're hearing right now, Slaying Dragons. You can find his music on Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your music. So thanks again for tuning in, and we'll see you next time on Kill the Dragon.